In the earliest days of moving pictures, film was little more than a novelty, an attraction shown between stage acts, a simple mechanical miracle. People gathered not for stories, but to marvel at the technology itself. A train arriving at a station, a man sneezing, workers leaving a factory. The world stared at these flickering images as though they were magic, yet beneath the awe lay a quiet disappointment. Motion pictures moved, yes, but they did not dream. They recorded life, but they did not reshape it. They showed reality, but they did not stretch it into wonder. Something was missing, something big. Audiences wanted stories, stories that lifted them out of their ordinary lives. Stories that defied logic, that bent time, that awakened imagination the way fairy tales once did. But early filmmakers were bound by the limits of the real world. Cameras could only capture what existed in front of them. If a filmmaker wanted a chair to walk or a drawing to leap from a page, there was no technique capable of making it happen. The technology was miraculous, but it was also painfully rigid. And into this world of rigid boundaries stepped a man who had spent his entire life refusing to be boxed in, James Stuart Blackton. Blackton didn't see the camera as just a recording device. He saw it as a doorway, a crack between worlds, just wide enough to fit the impossible. He believed that cinema didn't have to copy reality, it could create its own. While others accepted the limitations of film, he saw only unexplored possibilities waiting to be uncovered. Yet he wasn't born a pioneer. He had no grand studio, no technical training, no wealthy backers. What he had was curiosity, the kind that keeps a person awake long after the rest of the world is asleep. The kind that whispers, there is more, there must be more. And that curiosity would soon transform him from a simple cartoonist into one of the founding magicians of modern cinema. The need for invention grew stronger with every passing year. The crowds wanted more spectacle, more fantasy, more reasons to gasp inside darkened theaters. The stage could offer illusions, but on film, illusions felt flat. Theatrical tricks didn't translate to the camera. Audiences wanted something new, not just movement, but life. Producers and directors scrambled for answers, but few dared to experiment. It was expensive, risky, and far easier to keep repeating the same safe formula. But Blackton had never been afraid of risk. To him, art was not about comfort, it was about discovery. And so he watched. He studied the behavior of the camera with the eyes of a detective. He paid attention to the unnoticed, the in-between moments, the tiny flickers that other filmmakers ignored. One evening, as he examined a series of still photographs, he noticed something peculiar. When he flipped through them quickly, the drawings seemed to jump, just a twitch, just a hint of life. But it was enough to spark something wild inside him, enough to make his heart race, enough to make him realize he had just stumbled upon a secret. Motion wasn't found, it was created. What if you didn't film movement? What if you built movement, one tiny moment at a time? The idea was ridiculous, fragile, and nearly impossible. It required patience beyond reason. It required imagination beyond convention. But it also held the power to unlock a new era of storytelling, a way to let drawings walk, a way to let toys breathe, a way to let the unreal become undeniably, astonishingly real. And so the seed of stop-motion animation was planted. Blackton's early attempts were messy, awkward, full of failure. Objects jumped instead of gliding, shadows flickered, frames refused to align, yet with every mistake he learned more. With every ruined reel, his understanding sharpened. Where others would have abandoned the experiment, he pushed deeper. He believed that even failure had a voice, and that voice was guiding him towards something extraordinary. By now, film studios were desperate for innovation. The world was changing fast, and audiences wanted to be dazzled. They wanted spectacle, mystery, surprise. Blackton's strange experiments, tiny movements, photographed again and again, might have looked foolish to an outsider, but to him, they were the building blocks of a new cinematic language. And then, finally, after countless nights of relentless tinkering, it happened. A toy chair slid across a table. A plate lifted on its own. A matchbox opened as though controlled by invisible fingers. Small actions, yet when they played on the screen, the audience gasped. They did not just witness an illusion, they witnessed the birth of a new form of magic. Blackton had done it. He had taken the stillness of photography and breathed motion into it. He had taken the limitations of film and turned them into strengths. He had opened a door that had never existed before, and behind it lay a universe of endless possibilities. The crowds no longer just watched his films. They leaned forward, they whispered, they believed. His success wasn't luck, it wasn't chance, it wasn't a single brilliant moment. It was the result of vision fueled by curiosity, carried by persistence, and guided by the belief that imagination deserves tools powerful enough to bring it to life. Cinema would never be the same again, and neither would storytelling. Long before James Stuart Blackton became a pioneer of film, he was simply James, an imaginative boy wandering the foggy streets of Sheffield, England, with a pocket full of pencils and a mind bursting with pictures no one else could see. His family lived modestly, but modesty could not contain the world that lived inside him. While other children played in the alleys, James sat by the window sketching the horses, the cobblestones, the expressions of passing strangers. He didn't just draw what he saw, he drew what he felt, a rare gift that made even his earliest sketches tremble with life. His childhood lacked luxury, but it overflowed with curiosity. His parents worked tirelessly, and though they could not offer him great wealth, they offered him something far more powerful, the freedom to imagine. They let him chase ideas, fill pages, and lose hours in the quiet hum of creativity. And in those long, silent evenings, the seeds of a remarkable future were planted. But nothing in his early world suggested he would one day change cinema forever. In fact, his life seemed to be moving in a completely different direction. When James was still young, his family packed their hopes into a single voyage across the Atlantic and set sail for America. Immigration was not a dream, it was survival. They searched for opportunity, a new beginning, a chance to rewrite their destiny. For James, that journey felt like the first chapter in a much bigger story, although he did not yet know what the story was. Landing in New York was like stepping into another universe. Noise, light, crowds, a city that never seemed to sleep. But for James, the chaos wasn't overwhelming, it was energizing. It was a place where ideas grew as fast as buildings, a place where the future felt possible. He attended school in America, where teachers quickly noticed his skill with both pen and performance. He was clever, unusually observant, and endlessly inventive. He loved words almost as much as he loved lines on a paper. Education sharpened his expression, taught him discipline, and gave him a new set of tools to shape his imagination. But no classroom could satisfy him for long. He needed more than lectures. He needed a way to turn his swirling ideas into something real. He found that opportunity through drawing. Blackton began working as a sketch artist and cartoonist for newspapers, his first real step toward the world that would one day make him famous. His illustrations caught attention quickly. They were lively, playful, and full of character. People didn't just see his drawings, they felt them. They sensed motion within the stillness, personality within the lines. It was this unique spark that eventually pulled him into the orbit of performers, inventors, and creative minds. New York's entertainment world was expanding rapidly, and Blackton found himself swept into its current. He performed live drawings on vaudeville stages, turning blank pages into characters right before audiences' eyes. This wasn't just art, it was spectacle, and spectators loved it. Yet even as his career grew, a different part of his life began to take shape, one that grounded him, softened him, and gave him balance. Blackton married, and with marriage came stability he had never known as a restless young immigrant. His home life offered warmth, companionship, and a haven where his imagination could rest when it needed to. His wife believed in him, even when his ideas sounded impossible. She gave him the confidence to chase the dreams that others dismissed. Her support didn't just comfort him, it fueled him. Still, Blackton was never built for a quiet life. Behind closed doors in his studio, he wrestled with bigger questions. How do drawings truly move? How do you turn imagination into something the eye can follow? What if art didn't reflect life, What if it created life? These were not idle thoughts. They were obsessions, thoughts that stretched into late nights and ink-stained mornings, thoughts that eventually pulled him toward invention. His personal life and professional life fed each other. His marriage gave him stability. His art gave him meaning. His early childhood taught him observation. His immigration taught him resilience. His education taught him structure. The city taught him possibility. Piece by piece, all the experiences of his life built toward something extraordinary, even though he didn't yet know what that something was. But those closest to him sensed the truth. Blackton was not like other artists. He was not content with static images, with fixed expressions, with art that simply sat on the page. He wanted art that moved, breathed, lived. His childhood imagination, his immigrant courage, his education, his marriage, his hunger for something beyond the ordinary. All of it formed the foundation of the inventor he would become. He was a man shaped by two worlds, the quiet world of lines and sketches and the roaring world of America's booming entertainment age. And somewhere in the tension between the two, the seeds of stop-motion filmmaking had already begun to take root. Soon, these seeds would pull him into a journey that would change not just his life, but the future of cinema itself. James Stuart Blackton's journey toward invention did not begin with a blueprint or a grand idea. It began with a spark, small, almost invisible, buried inside a moment that most people would have forgotten the next day. But Blackton was not most people. He was the kind of man who could stare at an ordinary detail and see a doorway to something extraordinary. And the moment that changed his fate began with a simple invitation, one that would alter both his life and the future of film. Blackton, by then a well-known cartoonist and performer, was invited to Thomas Edison's studio to demonstrate his drawing skills. Edison wanted a short film showing Blackton sketching faces and characters with incredible speed. For Blackton, it was an opportunity to step behind the camera for the first time. He accepted without hesitation, unaware that he was walking into the most important experience of his creative life. Inside Edison's studio, surrounded by strange contraptions, humming machines, and the intoxicating scent of innovation, Blackton felt something awaken inside him. He watched Edison's cameramen crank film reels steadily, capturing movements frame by frame. It looked mechanical, yet behind those cranks, behind the metal, there was a rhythm, a pattern, a system, a heartbeat. Blackton filmed his drawings that day, but something unexpected happened. When he watched the playback, he noticed a flicker, a moment where the camera had captured not just the drawing, but the illusion of motion between strokes. A face seemed to shift, a line seemed to stretch, something moved, something that shouldn't have. Most people would have dismissed it as an accident, but Blackton froze, his heart raced. This was no mistake, this was a clue. He returned home, that night unable to think of anything else. What if motion didn't need actors? What if stories didn't need sets or props? What if the camera could bring drawings to life one tiny moment at a time? What if the secret of animation was not movement itself, but the illusion of movement? And so began a journey of relentless experimentation. He started small, a drawing on a page, a slight alteration, a single photograph. Then another and another. He repeated the process late into the night, adjusting lines by mere fractions. When he played the frames back, the drawing twitched, not smooth, not graceful, but alive, a spark, a beginning. Blackton felt a thrill he had never known before. He had found a new language hidden inside the camera, one no one had ever fully spoken. But learning that language would cost him sleep, comfort, and the certainty of success. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. His studio became a battlefield of scattered papers, broken pencils, and reels of film curled like forgotten serpents. He experimented with objects next, a toy chair, a coin, a matchbox. He moved them an inch, took a photo, moved them again, took another. The process was painfully slow. 1 second of film required 24 carefully taken photographs. An entire scene could devour hours. There were nights when nothing worked, when shadows ruined shots, when objects toppled over, when film jammed in the camera. nights when he wondered if he was chasing a fantasy too delicate to hold. But then there were moments, tiny victories, that kept him going. The first time a matchbox slid smoothly across a table. The first time a coin spun on screen without a human hand. The first time a toy soldier marched with perfect rhythm. These small miracles fed his obsession. He was no longer experimenting, he was discovering, inventing. He was stepping into a world where the impossible became possible one frame at a time. Finally, in 1907, everything converged into one extraordinary creation, The Haunted Hotel. When Blackton screened the film for the public, the audience gasped, plates lifted on their own, chairs moved without being touched. Objects danced, twisted, and performed impossible feats. People whispered that Blackton must have used magic, real magic. It was stop motion, though the world did not yet know the name. What they did know was that they were witnessing something never seen in the history of film. Blackton's journey had taken him from a curious boy sketching in England to an immigrant chasing dreams in America to a pioneer pushing the very boundaries of storytelling. He had turned the camera from a passive recorder into an active creator. He had taken the cold precision of technology and infused it with imagination. But invention is rarely met with immediate recognition. Many critics dismissed his work as a novelty, something clever but insignificant. Blackton didn't argue, he didn't defend himself, he simply kept creating. He knew what they didn't, that he had unlocked a door that could never again be closed. Behind that door lay an entire universe, one that would soon produce legendary stop-motion works, from King Kong to Wallace and Gromit to every modern animation made frame by frame. Blackton had lit the first spark. Others would carry the flame, but he had started the fire. His journey was not about fame or fortune, it was about possibility, about daring to believe that the impossible could be built from tiny increments, about proving that imagination, when combined with patience, can reshape the world. And his story was far from over. Long before computers, long before digital editing, long before studios filled screens with glowing landscapes and impossible creatures, there existed a form of filmmaking that relied not on speed, but on patience. A craft where movement was not captured, but constructed, where life was not recorded, it was invented. And the man who first revealed this magic to the world, James Stuart Blackton, understood something profound. That motion itself could be sculpted one heartbeat at a time. To truly understand the power of stop motion, imagine stepping into Blackton's studio more than a century ago. The air is heavy with dust from charcoal drawings. Rolls of film hang from hooks like long, delicate ribbons. A single lamp flickers in the corner, and in the center of the room, utter stillness. A toy chair, a small box, a camera waiting like a silent witness. Most filmmakers pointed their cameras at actors and scenes and simply pressed record. But Blackton's process was different. He didn't ask the world to move for him, he moved the world himself. Stop motion begins with a simple idea. Every frame is a photograph, every photograph is a moment. String those moments together fast enough, and the illusion of motion is born. But simple does not mean easy. Blackton first placed an object exactly where he wanted the action to begin. He double-checked the lighting, the camera angle, the shadows, the distance. Then he took a single photograph, one click of the camera, capturing one perfect still image. This was frame one. Then the real work began. He reached into the scene with surgeon-like care and moved the object just a fraction. A chair leg slid forward a few millimeters. A toy soldier's arm lifted by the tiniest amount. These movements were so small that to the naked eye they seemed insignificant, but Blackton knew that film had its own way of seeing. He stepped back and took another photograph. Then he repeated the process, again and again and again. Each adjustment was barely noticeable. But when dozens, sometimes hundreds, of these still images were played in rapid sequence, something astonishing happened. The object appeared to move on its own. Blackton understood the elegance behind the illusion. Motion pictures typically run at about 16 frames per second in his era. That meant 16 photographs were needed for just 1 second of movement. A 5-second scene required 80 careful adjustments. A minute-long sequence demanded nearly 1,000. Stop motion was not magic, but its patience was. The camera played these individual images like a flipbook. The human eye, unable to process each cut separately, blended the frames together and perceived continuous movement. What the viewer saw was not a series of pictures, but life emerging from stillness. But Blackton's genius wasn't just in understanding this technique. It was in mastering all the invisible challenges that came with it. He learned early that lighting had to remain perfectly stable. If the lamp flickered or shifted even slightly between frames, the illusion broke. Shadows would jump unnaturally, betraying the trick. So he locked his lights in place, sealed windows, and often worked at night to avoid interference. The camera, too, had to be absolutely still. One accidental bump, one slip of the tripod, and the entire shot was ruined. Many times, Blackton had to restart a sequence from scratch because a tiny vibration threw off the alignment. Even the room itself had to be controlled. Creaking floorboards, rattling carts, footsteps outside, any disturbance could be captured on film. Stop motion required not just creativity, but discipline. A filmmaker had to become part artist, part engineer, part monk. And yet Blackton thrived in this delicate balance. Every challenge was an invitation to innovate. He developed methods for tracking positions, marking object placements, and planning actions frame by frame. He learned to think in micro-movements, to anticipate how the smallest adjustments would translate on film. He became fluent in the language of increments, a language few had ever spoken before. Through stop motion, he constructed physical illusions that defied logic. Objects rose as though touched by spirits. Furniture glided across rooms, tools assembled themselves, drawings shifted as if waking from a dream. The screen became a place where reality bent, broke, and reshaped itself under the force of imagination. And audiences were mesmerized. Many believed Blackton had discovered secrets known only to magicians. Others whispered that he had used harnesses, strings, hidden hands, but he offered no explanation. The magic was not in revealing the method, it was in letting the audience wonder. What Blackton truly created was not just a filmmaking technique, it was a revolution. He taught the world that animation was not confined to ink on paper or puppets on strings. Any object, any shape, any figure could become a character if given enough frames, enough care, enough vision. He opened a door that countless artists would later walk through, from the creators of King Kong to modern animators who build entire worlds one frame at a time. Stop motion became a bridge between imagination and reality, a craft where time obeyed the filmmaker's fingertips, a medium where silence could sing and stillness could dance. And it all began with a man who looked at the camera